Argentina has asked Interpol to arrest Iran's interior minister over a bombing in 1994 in Buenos Aires. The minister, Ahmed Vahidi, is part of an Iranian delegation currently visiting Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Interpol announced that it issued a red alert seeking his arrest at the request of Argentina. Argentina also asked the governments of those two nations to arrest Vahidi. Last week, Iran's foreign ministry rejected the ruling by an Argentine court, blaming Iran for the two bombing attacks. The foreign ministry said the claims in the verdict were unsubstantiated and politically motivated. For more on all of that, we go to Nicaragua to speak with journalists Stephen Sefton and Camila Escalante. Stephen, Camila, let's talk about that. Stephen, maybe you can set it up for us.
Well, in 1994, there was a bombing of a big Jewish community building in Buenos Aires called the Amaya building. That case has never been fully investigated or even thoroughly investigated because it's become a kind of football, if you like, a diplomatic and political football, both in terms of Argentina's national politics and in terms of international politics too. Now, with the arrival in government of a very strict ally of somebody who's very much an ally of the United States government, Javier Milei, Argentina's foreign policy has become far more aggressive against Iran, in tune with United States foreign policy itself. But also in national terms, the case, the Amaya bombing case, has now received official imprimatur accusing from the Court of Cassation, which is the last court in the line of any judicial process in Argentina. And their decision has been a very clearly politically motivated decision, accusing Iran or even high-ranking officials in Iran's government of being responsible for something like 70 people that were killed in that explosion and over 100 were wounded. It was the most serious terrorist incident probably in Argentina's whole history. So now you have the Argentine judicial system accusing Iran. You have the Argentinian government going after Iran on that basis, opening up this request to Interpol to go after senior Iranian officials, including, as I understand it, their Minister of Defense. And that's all part and parcel of the United States' efforts to co-opt friendly governments friendly to the United States for their broader international diplomatic purposes. I think it's important to note that while this is happening, at the same time, you have a very strong effort by victims of US measures which can legitimately be called economic terrorism, economic aggression. The ALBA countries, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, are meeting. There's a summit of heads of state in Caracas today, and that'll include Bolivia, of course, and some of the leaders of the Caribbean island nations that are members of ALBA. And so I think we can see that while the United States is pressing strongly with its allies to achieve its international relations objectives in the region, there's also a very strong source of resistance to that in the countries of the Bolivarian Alliance of the Americas.
Right. And so speaking of Iran and Latin America, we can see that Brazil, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, and Bolivia, at least those five, and of course Brazil is a notable one because it's a major country, have strong and ever-strengthening relations with Iran. And it seems like it's the irreversible trend here. We may see that in other countries as well. And it really contrasts greatly with the strong propaganda against Iran that is being pumped out in the global northern countries like Canada, where the extreme right and Zionists are pressuring the Trudeau administration to list the IRGC, the Iranian military as a terrorist entity. And it's because they see Iran as a real threat. But what's really interesting, with Latin America and Iran expanding relations so crucially, obviously this is something that Argentina is going to miss out on, is that despite all of the economic and financial sanctions pitted against Iran during all of these years, Iran has been able to develop its really impressive military capacity. You'll see that if you watch Iranian state media, but obviously the West is propagandizing around that as well. But Iran has an arsenal of hundreds of thousands of missiles that are pointed at enemy targets. And the military experts and engineers have made huge progress in manufacturing this wide range of indigenous local equipment, meaning that the armed forces of Iran are self-sufficient. And that's it's not hard to see how that's a weak point for the US, for NATO, and for Zionism, because in the example of Ukraine, they're not self-sufficient. In fact, they've come here to Latin America to beg us here for Russian weapons to fight Russia, whereas Iran is self-sustainable and is going to be able to actually fight the Zionist entity and defend itself and maybe even neighbors, and of course Palestinians from attacks in the coming time, because it's able to produce and sustain its own war capacity. So it's really interesting because our countries, particularly small countries like Cuba and like Nicaragua, have a lot to gain from this relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, Don and Camilla, that Iran has made this tremendously impressive achievement of being able to force the United States and Israel to back down, as we saw recently in the missile attack by Iran that got through supposedly the most sophisticated air defenses in the world, although I'd say that Russia has the most sophisticated air defenses in the world, but that's another issue. And that whole issue of these so-called sanctions, which are in fact what the United Nations itself calls unilateral coercive measures, are fundamentally illegal under the UN Charter, of course. Iran has made this tremendous leap to be able to defend itself against the most powerful nation in the world. And it's done so in coordination with other countries like the Russian Federation and People's Republic of China and the whole BRICS, the BRICS Plus group now, of which Iran is a member, along with Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other countries that joined in January formally. But that also is relevant in the case of countries that have been subject to these illegal coercive measures, these unilateral coercive measures from the United States and the European Union, among others, like Venezuela. Venezuela, too, has succeeded in overcoming certainly the worst effects of those illegal coercive measures, and that has been due in no small part to its support and coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so, what we're likely to see in this summit today in Caracas by the ALBA countries, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, and some Caribbean island nations as well, is that group will again express its own independence and commitment to their country's sovereign development, at the same time as they're almost certainly going to express solidarity with the people of Palestine currently under genocidal assault by Israel. And they may well have something to say about Iran itself as well, because their fundamental interests in terms of international relations are very similar and aligned.
We're going to have to drop it here, and I thank both of you for your participation and your information and your expertise this week, and we'll speak with you again next week.
Thanks a million, Don.
Thank you, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.